Just in time for the big travel holiday, we have another episode ready for you about road maps. Engaging students with authentic learning experiences is essential to being an effective teacher. Here's the 2026 New Hampshire Teacher of the Year, Megan Philbrook, speaking about her experience with my primary source borrowing service, EPS2Go, which aims to do just that.
Going above just our standards is really, really important to grab our learners and engage them. And I think that's what your kits really do. It's a museum in a box that comes to your classroom that makes our teaching lives so much easier. So once I had my first taste of your kits, I knew that there's something here that we social studies teachers really need to draw upon more. So that finalist visit is your last round to kind of show off and showcase what you can do and why you should be New Hampshire Teacher of the Year. And with my primary source kit, I would like to think, of course, that I definitely wowed the selection committee. There was just something in there for every single person that came to visit, and my students were right in the history, and you couldn't ask for more.
If you'd like to learn more about how EPS2Go can bring an authentic history experience directly to your classroom, visit everything-history.com/EPS2Go today. Welcome to the Everything is a Primary Source podcast, the show where we navigate history through popular culture. I'm your host, Eric Salmonson. I'm a social studies teacher, historian, and pop culture enthusiast. Each episode, I sit down with everyday people to discuss the media, objects, places, and events that shape us and reveal what they say about the past, as well as who we are now. The Everything is a Primary Source podcast is, therefore, your history, my history, our history through popular culture. Shows from my collection a series of road maps, and I think I had one of Florida, but I don't know if I brought it today. Road maps and just maps in general when traveling come in lots of different designs. Sometimes we have kind of the silly ones that are more for to highlight businesses in a tourist town or something like that. But I think that all the ones that you have in your collection, some of them dating as early as the 1930s, all the way up to the 70s or 80s, are the variety that are pretty trustworthy.
Yeah.
Right? So you were telling me before I hit record that when you used to travel in college and you would plan things out using paper maps, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, I went to college back in the late 80s, early 90s, and after I graduated, a buddy of mine and I decided to take a cross-country trip, and one of the first steps that we had to do was we went to AAA, and we got these things called triptychs, which was a series of maps that they all assembled together, and they kind of laid out the path that you would end up taking, which was helpful because there were times that we were places where we didn't have a map, and before GPS that just meant pick a compass direction and drive until you see something you recognize.
Map skills are still very important even with the GPS. Like getting here today, and I was here last year, but of course I didn't memory lock the exact route.
Right.
I was using my GPS, but I was also having to size up what I'm looking at from a bird's eye view with the actual intersections and lights and things like that coming up. So even though we are very highly reliant on GPS still, those skills that you developed by reading the AAA map became essential, I assume, to even being successful now, navigating around.
And it's interesting because the maps today, they're both more and less detailed, right? And what I mean by that is with the GPS, it'll be highly accurate where it's telling you turn here, turn there, and all this. I remember when I was living in Colorado, the directions I was given to get to where I needed to go is you drive into the town. When you get to the third red house, you're turning right. Yep. You go up to Joe's gas station and you turn left. So it's to that degree, GPS loses some of that kind of local feel where you're using the landmarks to get around. But then when you're looking at these maps, there's a lot of data on it but you're limited by the print. So what you might end up seeing, like the town I live in, Florida, our high school has about 60 to 100 kids in a graduating class. We're a very small school, right? With some of these maps, it wouldn't surprise me if my town is not even on the map, because they're going to focus on the larger towns like Warwick and Goshen, which are on either side of us. And then, like, now all of a sudden you have these small little towns that might not be deemed important enough even to make it onto the map.
And that's unfortunate, because I think when your town arrives on a map, it kind of gives you credibility, agency, like somebody recognizes us, and it's an important thing as part of like community pride and spirit, I suppose, is saying like, yes, we exist enough to be on this map, but then if you literally erase them from the map, then you're without that. And it's funny what you're saying about using the landmarks and stuff. I remember years ago, my cousin was coming to visit us up in northern New York, and he was talking to my mom, getting directions from her, and she was using all landmarks. She's like, once you get off this road, look for the shop, and then 2 streets down, then there'll be a sign for a park. And he goes, can I talk to my uncle? Right. She put my dad on. He's like, Route 9, 7 miles, take a right on the street, you're there. Like that, the number system versus so like as social studies teachers, we talk geography with our students all the time, and we know that there's differences between location and place, right? Location is a specific thing on the map. Place is like all those things that make it different and identifiable. When somebody's using a road map, there is a choice to be made from the maker's perspective of like, we don't want to go too far into the place stuff. We want location, because we don't want anybody to get confused. As you're looking at these maps, like the route number is routinely posted like every couple miles on the map. You'll see what route it is, so that you know that you're still on the right one. And you'll see the town's name, but it's not going to say, and if you really want some good blueberry cobbler, stop at, it's like none of that. It's none of the place type stuff. It's all just straight up location.
And you also lose, because of the desire to standardize things, right? You end up having the way the map identifies things sometimes is very different than the way people do. Like, I know around the Hudson Valley, a lot of people, when you're going from the west side of the Hudson Valley to east side of the Hudson Valley, you're still going over the Tappan Zee Bridge, right? It doesn't matter that it's been renamed the Mario Cuomo Bridge.
Nobody
and when you're looking on the GPS and it says, well, take the thruway, right? And it's like, they don't even mention that you're going over a bridge, so like you run into those kind of disconnects between like the lived experience versus the documentary experience, if you will.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. When we're dealing with maps, and the question I pulled is like, how was this made, right? The cartographer, the original person who is actually doing the mapping, and I assume they themselves in all these eras are not going out and surveying the land themselves. It's just they're compiling information that's been gathered, usually probably in some kind of government archive, and saying this is, but they are not. They're going to resist the urge to make it too personalized. Like when you're on the Tappan Zee, make sure, if you're a passenger, take a look to your side and you can see a great skyline of New York City. If they're not going to say that at all. It's just going to be like Tappan Zee Bridge, toll, that kind of thing.
And then another thing that I noticed with buying like maps and stuff, like back when it was a thing, a big source where you get them were the gas stations. And a lot of the gas stations, like they had their own like branded map, if you will. So like the map that you're getting from Shell might be different than the one you're getting from Exxon. And then you start deciding that you like the way the Exxon map is formatted better than the Shell map. So now you go from Pennsylvania to Ohio, you could pull into an Exxon station just to buy the map. And then obviously you can get your gas and drink or snack or whatever there. So it's like when you talk about who's making it, like I think that like from a marketing standpoint, like I don't know for a fact, but I think it's a reasonable assumption that the gas stations were driven by some of that stuff.
No pun intended, right? Yeah. So I mean, you mentioned AAA, you mentioned Gulf, Exxon, Shell, Mobil. I mean, all the gas stations and the support thing. I don't know for a fact, but I can only guess because, like I said, one of these I think is from the 30s. I want to think that AAA, the American Auto Association, does that sound right?
Yeah,
Automobile.
American, yeah.
Probably came together pretty early on. Like I'm guessing 1920s or so would be like the birth of that, and a lot of these gas stations as well along with it. And I think that's so correct to that time period when things that were being kind of like in development, tried out in previous eras, were put under the microscope in the 20s and actually turned into, a workable science, and there's like some kind of reason to it. And you think about, that's when the U.S. highway system was born. I think 27 was when that was brought up, where we get, I think around here to be the closest on Route 9 would be part of that U.S. system. Route 20 goes across the state, actually goes across the whole country. Famously Route 66 from Chicago to LA. So that's when, and that's government subsidized roads, and it's a national highway. And so you have like the official map to go along with it. This isn't some silly, kind of thing. I also think about in the 20s, that's the same time period where movies, which had been just kind of like a artistic expression, a lot of experimentation with them. I think that same year is when you have the Academy for Motion Pictures Arts and Sciences is formed in the late 20s, where we take this, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work, and now we have an actual Academy of Science for this kind of thing. Do you think I'm on the right track with this? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I think you did have these organizations trying to like systemize travel, and people start thinking about it, and you talk about the original highway system in the 20s, and it gets reinvented like in the 50s with the interstate travel, and then you get these big, like the Route 80s, the 95s, and then they just cut through the country in a very different way. Like I love that scene from Cars when they talk about like Radiator Springs disappearing off the map, right? And that like is a real thing. It happened, where I began my career teaching in Tuxedo, New York, right? And we had a community, Greenville Lake, that was near us as well. And we saw the thruway comes in, and then all of a sudden everybody started going up to the Catskills and to the Adirondacks. And they used to come up like to Tuxedo and Green Lake as like a vacation area, right? And like as people move, it changes things. And then the other thing is when we talk about like maps and designations, like where are you going to funnel people? You think of the stories of like the Green Book and stuff like that during the segregated South, and then it's like now you end up having like these guidebooks that were designed to help people travel in a way that was bringing them to places that allow them to stay safe, allow them to get what they needed. So it was like kind of, when you look at the purpose behind the map, right? Is the map driven by getting tourists to Grand Canyon? Is the map designed towards like facilitating, travel in a community and stuff like that? You see the type of information and the way they're put together changes very different. And you may have different roads are highlighted, different communities are highlighted based on the purpose of why these things get created.
Our relationship with maps has changed. You could use a very accurate map from, say, 1800. You look at it of the exact same, say, region that one of these maps is covering, and you would look at that and say, well, there's 3 days. This is going to be a 3-day travel to get from A to B. Whereas in the automobile age, the same distance, you're like 3 hours, right? And so, like you said, that possibility of going to further places. The very first time my family ever went to Canada, because we lived pretty close to the border, we didn't dare go beyond one of the border towns in Canada because our map ended there. And we were like, we don't want to go to Montreal is only an hour away, but I mean, who knows what's up there? We don't actually have it on our map. But when you do get these maps at the gas station, from AAA, from any of these places, And like you said, it's a different world in the segregated South because it might not mean the same thing to,
Right.
the same map exists, but doesn't mean I'm welcome to go to any of these places. But it's like, if you have a car, you have a map, now these possibilities get that much more likely. You can say, okay, yeah, let's go to the Catskills, maybe even go all the way up to Lake George. Like that's a possibility now
Right.
because the road takes us there. I have this car that goes a lot faster than walking, or
Right.
the train even. I don't have to wait for other people like the train does.
Well, I'm still old school, so I'm driving my gas-powered car, but my sister has an electric vehicle. And like now you end up having maps that they have to point out like where the charging stations are, which is kind of like almost going back to like the old ways of traveling where it was like how far you could go was like limited because the charging stations aren't quite as ubiquitous yet, and it takes a little bit more time. So you have to be a little bit more methodical with the trips that you're taking to make sure that you can keep on going, right? And then where you end up deciding to stop for the night might end up changing based on where some of these places are, and you see that the maps start getting changed to highlight some of these things, right? It's like, if you stop here, you'll be okay. We got places for you,
Do you think that we're going to return to, with more and more electric cars that need charging and things, are we going to see potentially some of those roads that that have derelict motels and have all but gone off the map? Do you think they might return to the map? Is this an opportunity for them to perhaps resurrect their importance and say, we'll have a charging station here, and it turns into a hub for travel?
Well, when you think about where a lot of the communities develop, right? A lot of it was like, how far can a horse go in a day? How far can a car go in a day, right? And it was like, and then you'd end up having like the towns and the bars and stuff like that, the hotels, like all kind of pop around there. So with the electric cars, like it presents an opportunity for some of these towns off the map, right, to revive themselves, because if they become, the source, like they're the one place where you have a ton of stations in one place, right, or a lot of amenities around it. Like one of the drawbacks that my sister talks about is it takes time. Right, so like there's this one place she goes to get her car charged sometimes because there's like a restaurant not far from it. So it's like they try to arrange it so they go, they plug their car in, they go in and eat, right? And then they come out, the car's ready, and they go, right? So if you had like areas that were kind of allowed people to multitask like that, that would be an attraction, and it might pull people to an area that normally they wouldn't go.
That's because the traditional gas station is not a half-hour event. It's maybe 5 minutes. And so now that charging does take a little bit longer, like you said, it's an opportunity because a lot of these gas stations that are illustrated on these maps, they look like somewhere you'd spend maybe a little bit more time in those days. Somebody might have like a root beer stand right next to it. As a fellow educator, I know that taking our social studies classes to historical sites and museums can be a rewarding experience for everyone involved. But between coordinating transportation, keeping track of permission slips, and paying out of pocket for unforeseen expenses, it can also be a large task for a busy teacher. The Everything is a Primary Source to Go artifact borrowing service replicates the most engaging part of a museum field trip, and that's interacting with real historic objects directly in your classroom, but without the process and cost of taking your class off campus. The Everything is a Primary Source archive contains ephemera and physical objects dating from the 1820s onward, with emphasis on the 20th century. Pre-made and curated kits pull from the collection and are designed to complement your curriculum, just as the exhibits at your favorite cultural center do. Visit everything-history.com to learn more about EPS to Go and how it can help you bring the museum to your classroom. One of my favorite travel movies is It Happened One Night with Clark Gable and Claudette Colbert, where they're going from Florida Florida, not Florida, New York, to New York, and they're riding on a bus. And for the first half of the trip anyway, but they stop at a few different motels along the way. And in those days, motels were more like the cabin style, that you'd get a separate building from everybody else. But just like that sense of like there's not as much urgency to keep moving. Like they're like, okay, we're gonna stay here for the night.
So she was gonna do.
The bus will leave in the morning. Everybody there's communal showers, and he goes and gets his breakfast of donuts and coffee, and it's like it gets this like nice clue into. So this movie was made 34, I think. So you get this nice like view of all right, here's things are moving along. This is the system that's been created because of these roads and because of auto traffic, but they're not quite at that lightning speed that will eventually come by the end of the century, where everything is just hurling down the roadway, down the throughway, down the interstates. It's like this nice happy medium in a way for the 30s to have that.
Yeah, and like the community aspect of some of the idea of travel and how you move around can be significant. I was in Tennessee one time, and I had to get a tank of gas. It was like late at night, and I was going to use my debit card to buy the gas. I walk into the station to pay for it, and the cashier was confused, and she's like, if you're using your debit card, why didn't you use it at the machine? And I wasn't trying to be corny or anything, but I gave an answer. It's like, I've been driving by myself for a long time, and I'm like, if I paid for this at the pump, I never would have met you. Right. And she kind of like laughed, and she's like, oh, that's sweet. And like we chatted for like a couple minutes. I told her like what I was doing, and like it was just like a little 2-minute interaction with a person I normally never would have met. Right. But that's also kind of what makes travel interesting and fun. Like you go into the restaurant instead of going through the drive-thru. Like you go in and you talk, and you get these little 2-minute interactions with people. And like as I was saying before, it creates an opportunity for communities to kind of lean into that a little bit. Like create like the whole idea of recharging as an experience as opposed to a chore or a task.
I think people want it. You can tell, because like even I would be a big fan of like, let's move our debit card machines and our credit card machines to eye level, because I can't stand it when I'm at a store like that and I'm buying something, my whole interaction is looking down. I'm not even looking at the other human. It's like they may as well not even be there. In some cases they're not anymore. It's all automated, and it's like we don't want to lose out on that face-to-face interaction, and like recognizing even just for 2 minutes that like you matter, right? Your life is important, and I'm just acknowledging that you're here and you have thoughts and ideas, and maybe you have a suggestion for like a better way to go around here, or where's a good place to get a bite to eat. This morning I was on my way here, and I had a choice to make because I wanted to get some breakfast, and I was like, I was gonna go to McDonald's, but then I was like, I saw a diner, an actual like locally owned diner right across the street somewhere. I'll just go there. And as I was paying my bill, I said to the manager, exactly what happened. She's like, I was just at McDonald's the other day, and she's like, the line was long, and everything is like, you just punch in the buttons. You don't even talk to anybody anymore. It's not, the only people that work there just shove you your food, with number 72, just like, the diner, I mean, I hear her, she's talking to like a regular customer at the counter. She acknowledged me, obviously. It was like, regulars came in. She's like, "Oh, do you want your booth?" And I'm like, "You get that? That's diners are travel culture too, right? They're part of this, and that's what you miss out on if you just continue with this like fast. I think as a society, we collectively want to slow it down at least a little bit.
Well, and also I know I travel a lot because I like going and exploring. Like one of the things that like I'll do like routinely I do it with my daughter sometimes. Like, we'll get in the car and just pick a direction and drive and just explore, and like we'll just be gone all day. Thanksgiving is coming up, and I'm going down to Atlanta to visit my sister. I'm driving down. It's like it never even crossed my mind that I would fly, right? Because I like kind of seeing the country as it goes along. And one of the things that you end up seeing with this is that what's the point of going down to Atlanta if I'm going to go to a McDonald's?
Right.
I could do a McDonald's in my town. So like anytime I go to these places, I try to
Local flavor.
go places that I've never seen before, because that's why you're moving around, isn't it?
I have a feeling that that's probably a common thread for most of the people here today, social studies teachers. We teach social studies, not just history, right? Like, we are social people. We like to interact, or at least take in, like, of things like that, like the local flavor. Like, we went on a cross-country trip a couple years ago, and I like so wanted to go to a diner somewhere in the Southwest, and we did, in actually another town, oddly named Canadian, Texas was the name of the town. We went to the Canadian Diner, and you couldn't be any further from Canada. And it was just like, it was like almost like cue the twangy guitar as I walk in, like, and like everybody was so like, ma'am, had their cowboy hats on and said hi to my wife. Not, they didn't call me ma'am, but my wife. And they were like steak and eggs for breakfast, and then they're like, where are y'all from? Like, because you don't. And I was like, New Hampshire, and like, I've never been up there, and like I ended up sending them a postcard when I got home because of New Hampshire, because it was just like the roads, like I didn't have to drive across a field to get there at any point. The roads connected me all the way from New Hampshire to Canadian, Texas, and then beyond to the Grand Canyon.
Right.
As we were talking, I pulled this from the group of maps. Here's a flight, because you mentioned about air travel.
Right.
I think this is funny. This is a TW air route in the United States, folded up the exact same way all these road maps are.
Right.
But I'm like, this, it's interesting, and you get to look at a whole map of the U.S., or at least part of it. This is where they go.
Right.
But you have zero control over this.
Right.
Right? Like, this map doesn't do you any good. It's not like, okay, take a left, like, those maps, those are functional. Those are like, as long as the road doesn't go directly in the crease, I'm going to get where I'm going, and I have control over this vehicle.
And I think that, when you talk about the idea of place and stuff like that, I know that when I'm on a plane, it's not uncommon for me to put the map feature on the thing. Not that makes a difference, but like kind of it centers you, like knowing where you are. It's
And
like,
having a general
I'm flying
idea.
over wherever now, and like then you can kind of like imagine what you're looking at.
The more detailed, the better. I don't like it when it's just like a plane and it's the size of like the entire country.
Right.
I like it when it can zoom in a little bit, and you're right, because when you're that perspective, which is not terribly far from the perspective we get, the scale that we get on these road maps. You're looking down on this great, and I remember one time I was like, there's a big river down there. I wonder what one that is. And I call up the map and I think, oh, that's the Merrimack River, or that's, I think, actually the Connecticut River. I was watching it, and you could see it flowing, all the way from Vermont to Long Island Sound. It was pretty incredible.
Right.
And that's like, if I didn't have, like we started talking about, the map reading mentality, that would mean nothing to me. I'd just be like, okay, another river. But since I'm like, let's match it up. Like, let's see what the map is and what I'm looking at, and that way I can. When I was a kid, I used to take maps and just lay them out on my floor and just look at them for hours, and I still do that if I get a map in my hands. I like just to know where things are and have some familiarity with it.
Well, and have an idea where things are, because where you live makes a huge difference. I grew up in New York City, right? And now I live up in the Hudson Valley. Mm-hmm. Well, this area is far more rural than New York City, right? So a lot of my students and stuff, they go out ATVing, they hunt, they fish, they go skiing, stuff like that. Stuff that never would have dreamt of doing when I was a kid, because of
Seems
where
like
you
a
are.
world away of it.
Yeah. And when you're like on a map and you're sitting there and you're like, okay, well, I'm going west, I'm going north, south, right? And if you have a conception of where things are, how they're connected and stuff like that, it allows you to kind of like anticipate what opportunities exist, right? And kind of it makes sense a little bit, like when you're trying to figure out like, why is this place here or there and stuff like that, you know? So I just love looking at maps, and I know like some of the travels I've done is that, and again, because when I travel, I like experiencing people and communities. I don't remember what book or movie or where I heard it phrased, but like they made reference to traveling on the blue roads. Because in old maps they would have like the small highways, like the the highway system you're talking about in like the 20s, were written in blue ink, and then the interstates were put in red ink, right? And the interstates, they're really good for getting through a lot of time in a short amount of distance, but they're all pretty generic.
Yeah.
Right? They're all like a 4-lane highway. They all have the same stores on the rest stops and stuff like that. You're designed to go 80 miles an hour on them, so you're just bombing past things. The lovely Florida, New York, we have one of these roads, like you got 17A goes right through the middle of our town, right? So if you could try to drive 17A from Canada down to, I'm not even sure where it ends, you could come through our quaint little town, right? You'd never experience that if you're driving a thruway, right? So it's like a lot of times, like on like Google Maps, I'll put the avoid highways feature on, or like I'll intentionally try and drive the small roads just to.
It's a different plane of existence, whatever roads you end up deciding to take.
Yeah.
If time is your concern, interstates are the only way to go.
Yeah.
And you live that life. You, like you said, the rest areas are all basically the same stuff. You forget which one you're in half the time because they all look the same.
Yeah.
But if you want a more scenic route, or if time is not a concern, you want to do some exploring, then secondary or even tertiary, the extra secondary roads are your next stop. And that's where you get that flavor. This summer we were heading out, my wife's from Western New York, and we were going out to Rochester, and we wanted to stop in Oneonta. To see Pee Wee Herman's childhood home, which is in Oneonta. Yeah, he's from Oneonta. And the house, actually, they, unlike a lot of celebrity birthplace homes or whatever, they seem to embrace it a little bit. They have like the red bicycle from the movie in their yard, and like a little Pee Wee in the window and stuff.
Right.
Getting there was no problem because we just took, I think it was 88, Interstate 88 down to Oneonta. But then we were going our way back to Rochester, and there wasn't even a U.S. route to get there. It was like all these winding roads. Beautiful. I mean, we got to see some really charming towns in, I guess, central New York, and beautiful farmland. But it was just, after a while, I'm like, I need to get back to that plane of existence. I need to get back to I-90, because I know that one, and I can clock it perfectly, like Syracuse to Rochester hour, like that's these blocks of time. Right. Whereas like I have no idea I don't know how long it's going to take to get from West, Greensville front, to, I just made that up, but like this next town over, and it was a bad, we were just kind of anxious to get on our next path, and so we didn't appreciate it as much as if we just said, yeah, we got all day, we'll just take this other route and stuff, and
it definitely could be more stressful. I remember I'd gone out to Cleveland one time, and we're working our way back to Warwick, and we decided not to drive any highways, so now we're just doing these like back roads here and there, and had some wild experiences, like driving past a Walmart in eastern Ohio, and they had a section of the parking lot for the Amish horse and buggies. So seeing a horse and buggy parking section for at a Walmart in the 21st century is a little bit of a
it is a bit
like culture shock. So that was cool, but then at a certain point you start realizing that, all right, well, I'm down to like quarter a tank of gas, I don't really need gas yet, so you drive past a gas station and you're like, where am I? Because you're driving like through the woods, you're driving through these areas, and like there's no indication that when the next town is coming up, and if the next town comes up, that, is it going to be around? And if you're not on interstate, I hope you got a full tank of gas before it gets to be about 8, 9 o'clock at night, because there's a decent chance that
these places are closed.
Places are going to close, and then what? So that's like one of the drawbacks of exploring on the back roads. So
it's funny, the relationship and like what people think of when maps. And again, we don't live in that time as much anymore. But I remember, 15, 20 years ago, visiting New York City. And just to navigate, I brought with me, I got a pocket map, but I didn't want to keep that thing out too much, right? Mm-hmm. And I know there's plenty of tourists, especially in the more touristy spots throughout the city, but as a native of that city, I don't know if this is a correct assumption or not, but if somebody who wants to do no good sees somebody with a map, that makes them a target.
Oh, absolutely.
Whereas you go upstate, and I can only assume, is Middletown called that because it's like a midway between Albany and New York? That'd be my guess, but maybe it's not quite
maybe.
halfway,
I haven't really thought about the name of it.
I was trying to figure out why a relatively downstate city is called Middletown, you know, but Albany would be better, or Syracuse, good Middletown, but you go further upstate into one of these quaint little towns with, and you have your map out. Chances are somebody's going, oh, can I help you, find your way or something like that. They're not going to reach for your wallet or something.
Right. And like being able to identify where you are, like you have certain clues, like in New York City, or at least Manhattan, right? Well, if the numbers are getting bigger, right, you're going north, right, on the streets. You look at the avenues, right? Well, the small numbers are on the east and the big numbers are on the west. So like you could kind of wander, at least in Midtown, until you see what the pattern is of the numbers. Right. Are they going up or down? And then you orientate yourself. I lived in Denver for a bit, and because living in New York, it was go 5 blocks, turn right, go 2 blocks, turn left, right? And like that made sense to me. So now I'm in Denver, another major city, and people like, well, go 3 blocks north, and then you want to go 2 blocks west. And I'm like, do you think I have a compass with me?
Yeah.
Like, how am I supposed to accomplish this? And then I felt really dumb one day because I'm walking down the street in New York of Denver, and I look to my side, and you see the Rocky Mountains, because Denver's in the plains adjacent to the Rocky Mountains. Well, the mountains are always in the west, right? And they're not moving anywhere. So all you got to do is rotate your head a little bit. And once you see the mountains, your compass direction. Yeah. I'm like, oh, that's why everybody does it this way here.
But those are 2 great examples of like what we started out this conversation, planning, right?
Yeah.
Before you take your trip, if you've never been to Manhattan, know that how the grid system works, like what is north and what is south, what is east and what's west. If you've never been to Denver or any of those Rocky Mountain cities, understand that that's their understanding of how to contextualize and explain things. So we just got a lot out of this conversation. I love it. Yeah. So if you believe it or not, this is going on 35 minutes of conversation. That's how this works. So I thank you so much for taking the time, and enjoy the rest of the conference that you're hosting, and I appreciate you having me here.
Thank you.
Popular culture, by definition, connects and unites us, and proves that people of different backgrounds, in fact, have a lot in common with one another. I hope you enjoyed this conversation, at least in part, for that reason. If it connects with you and you'd like to add to it, or any of the podcast episodes, just visit everything-history.com and search for the Everything is a Primary Source project, which can be found in the classroom section of the website. We'd love to hear what you have to say. Be sure to rate and share this podcast wherever you are listening to it now, and follow Everything as a Primary Source on social media, including YouTube and especially Instagram. Thank you for listening to the EPS podcast, where everything is a primary source.